welcome everybody to this educational session on a lawsuit that's focused around the Tangelo Park area. My name is Mike Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, and with me today, I have my partners Renee Rocha and Michael Ram. Before we get started with the substance of why we're here and what we want to talk about today, I want to first tell you that this is an open forum, that this is a public forum, that this is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and we know that media is present at this event, as well as we assume that there could be members of the defendants in this case of Lockheed Martin attending the recording and the presentation to learn about the case and to learn about your side of the case. And for that reason, I want to caution everybody that we will have a question and answer session at the end of our presentations, and we will present a presentation based off what we have found in the regulatory filing so far and how it could impact the community of Tangelo Park, the people that live and work there. But with that said, we will likely defer any questions that would constitute something that could be attorney-client privilege. You know, we also have clients here as well that have tuned in to get a little bit more in-depth view about some of the things that we've learned recently that maybe they haven't heard yet. So this recording is not privileged in that sense. So nothing that if you say something on this question and answer, it'll be subject to all levels of use in the litigation. And so for that reason, if you're more comfortable doing it by chat, or if you have a question that's of sensitive nature, we'll provide you with contact information at the end. If we can pull up just do we have the slides going, Renee?
Yes, give me 2 seconds. I'll pop it up there for you.
Thanks.
Okay, you should be seeing it momentarily.
All right. So as you know, we're here talking about a chemical exposure case that took place in the Tangelo Park area, which we believe from regulatory documents show that the chemicals and the environmental insults became aware of this case when a group really of attorneys recommended to us some clients that they had talked to and noticed some things that were peculiar as far as autoimmune diseases that seemed rare on the face, and people that didn't know each other except for having in common that they worked in the Tangelo Park area started having these autoimmune diseases. And in the first case, it was multiple sclerosis. And as we started talking to those clients, you know, they started telling us about other people that they knew. And there was enough there. There was enough for us to go and pull the regulatory file. You know, there are public filings that are made available that anybody can go online and find. And we're going to share some documents we found. But there are thousands of pages. And what they talk about essentially is the chemicals and the potential carcinogens and the handling of these chemicals by Lockheed Martin. They're required to keep filings of how they dispose of them, how they use them, and what's going on with them. When we started to pull these files, and we're going to go through it in a lot more detail, we noticed that there were some carcinogens on there, some known carcinogens, meaning cancer-causing chemicals that are recognized by the Department of Health, that are recognized by the EPA and other governing bodies, that were being disposed of in a way that we felt put the Tangelo Park community, those that both lived and worked there, at a higher risk. That led us to our experts, to our toxicologists, who we have leaned on heavily. You know, we are not experts personally in toxicology, although Michael Ram and Renee have extensive experience on these environmental type exposure cases and how it affects people. Renee worked just recently on the Dicamba lawsuit, which involved a Monsanto product that was used for crops, but ended up causing harm. He's also worked on the BP oil spill in the Merrimack Valley case, and has worked with me on the Roundup exposure case with cancer. Michael Ram, likewise, has spent his career working on class action type lawsuits, meaning where are representatives of a community that have actions in common, and they're generally, you know, involve monetary actions and similar injuries that are almost exactly the same. And he's going to talk to you about the two cases that he's working on, which are the injunctive relief to stop the ongoing disposal in a way that may be harmful to the people of Tangelo Park, as well as medical monitoring, meaning that people have been exposed over decades, going back to the 1950s is when we first recognized that these chemicals were used and disposed of on the property in a way that we feel may be inappropriate, at least by the thought of our experts. And because of that, people are maybe left at a higher risk of certain diseases. When we compare the carcinogens, the chemicals that cause cancer, or these autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis and some other very rare diseases that we've been contacted over the last couple of days about, to the actual carcinogen list, it matches up, and to the point that they basically fold into each other, that it was surprising to us that it was such a clear match of some of the chemicals with the diseases that our clients have suffered at this point. We have signed up about 200 people that lived or worked in that area and are experiencing these. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Renee, who's going to kind of go over a little bit of the history and some of the chemicals before
Thanks,
going
Mike,
to Michael.
and thank you all for
Renee?
joining us. What we're going to do in this presentation is discuss a little bit about what we've found on a high level, and discuss what we're talking about in our lawsuits, what we're alleging in them, and what we're seeking through them. So what this lawsuit is about Lockheed Martin's facility over there on Sand Lake Road. And what we are alleging in the lawsuits is that their improper disposal of highly toxic wastes has led to a giant contamination problem on that site, which is hazardous to people who work and live nearby. And furthermore, that the activities that they have engaged in to treat the contamination has actually increased the risk to the folks nearby. So let's talk a little bit about what that is. This is a map of the site that Lockheed Martin operates on. Sand Lake Road is up here on the north, if you guys can see my cursor. You got Universal Drive over here on the west, and on the south, I think that's Beeline Highway. What we've notated here are multiple sites that have established contamination according to the regulatory filings. And when we say contamination, there are numerous contaminants present at each of these sites within the facility. There are extremely high levels of contamination that have been present, and the contaminants that we're talking about are extremely hazardous to human health. And we'll go over some of those later on in this presentation, but one of the most dangerous things about the contaminants that are found here is that many of them are what are known as volatile organic compounds. And what that means is that these chemicals are not stable. They will rapidly vaporize and turn into a gas. And once they're in a gaseous form, they can travel off-site with winds and cause exposure to people who are nearby. The contamination is found in the soil and the groundwater throughout this facility at these multiple sites. And these are all areas where these chemicals can vaporize and travel off-site. Another problem that can, and we allege has occurred, is that the normal plant operations throughout the years disturb the contaminated soils and cause those soils to enter the wind. And when that happens, you can inhale the small micro soil particles like you would the gaseous contaminants. You can also ingest them through swallowing them in what you're drinking or what you're eating. And you can have dermal exposure to your skin, which is also harmful for many of these chemicals. So this is a problem that dates back, as Mike said, for several decades. And in the early 1980s, the regulators made them inspect their site and determined that there was high levels of contamination throughout. including these areas that we've indicated here in yellow. So Lockheed Martin started working to treat its contaminated soils and groundwater to remove and lessen the contaminants that were present in there. They did that through a few different methods. One was called an air stripping tower, and that's mainly for groundwater. It causes the volatile compounds to become separated from the groundwater, leaving you with clean groundwater, or if not clean, at least groundwater with lower concentrations of harmful chemicals. But it doesn't destroy the toxins themselves. What it does is just separate them as a gas. Now, a responsible method of dealing with those remaining toxic gases is to contain them and seal them and ship them off site to make sure that nobody either on the site or near the site is contaminated. What Lockheed Martin was doing instead, according to the regulatory files that we've seen, is injecting those harmful toxic waste directly into the air that people breathe. And we allege that this made the potential for exposure much worse than it already was for the folks who were living and breathing nearby, because it essentially concentrated the amount of chemicals that were entering the air and capable of being inhaled. You'll notice in many of these locations we have an additional notation, AST. Those are locations where air stripping towers have been utilized. There may be others throughout the facility where they have been utilized as well. Our review is ongoing. They also installed what are called soil vapor extraction systems. And they operate very similarly to the air stripping towers, except for soil. So they take the contaminated soils and separate the volatile compounds from the soils, leaving you with cleaner soils, but gas toxin remaining.
Hey, Renee?
Yes.
I think your connection might be coming through a little bit choppy. You may need to call in on your phone, but just so I can repeat some of those things that you were saying so that everybody can hear, is that there are two different, they're identified on here, but the air stripper and the soil stripper, the sparge system, both of those systems work in a similar way in that the air stripper takes the groundwater that is known to be contaminated and generally pulls out the contaminations. And the sparge stripper does the same with soil that has been contaminated by the same carcinogens and chemicals. Well, generally, when something like that is done, those contaminants have the ability to be captured and then disposed of. In this case, based off the initial reading of the filings and what was seen, that was not done. Instead, once stripped, those chemicals were put into the air, which at that point where they become gases, as we talked about at the organic or volatile organic compounds, it becomes gases, it goes into the air, and it allows the wind to take it. And that's the reason why the community we believe most impacted is that is adjacent to the Tangelo Park area. You want to try again, Renee?
I will try, and if I break up, I will get with Mercedes and try to call him from my phone. Apologies, everybody. Yeah, Mike, that's a good synopsis. So there were several different kinds of systems they were using, all of them designed in a similar way, where the contaminants went directly into the air instead of being contained. So I'd like to talk about some of the contaminants that we are discussing. And just for reference, here is what's around this Lockheed Martin facility. The folks in Tangelo Park, right here, less than a mile from the facility. Within 2 miles, you've got Universal Studios to the north, other things to the south, and then 3 miles you can see there just for reference. And I can tell you, as Mike said at the top of this presentation, the outpouring from this area that we've received just in the past few days has been astounding. We've been working with a toxicologist who predicted this and said you are going to be blown away by what you see when you make this public. And he was right. Uh, so what kinds of chemicals are we talking about here? These are a list of the chemicals that we allege in our complaint.
Hey, Renee.
Yes.
Hey, Mercedes, can you get Renee the call in for the Zoom so he can call in as a participant?
Yes. You will.
All right. And that way, I think that it'll just be better for the connection if he just goes ahead and connects that way. One of the things going back to that previous slide, when we're talking about the area that's affected, our initial suspect from looking and talking with our expert was the Tangelo Park area in the surrounding workplaces, because it physically touched the plant. When we go back to the history of Tangelo Park, it was originally built as a place for factory workers to live back in the old Martin factory before it became Martin Marietta, before it became Lockheed Martin. So the fact that community was impacted was the first place that we looked. As we start to go out and as the case became public, the different areas, the orange going out 2 miles and then 3 miles as far as where the wind can go, is kind of representative at this point of where we've received calls with people that are concerned that they may have been affected or that they have certain illnesses or diseases that are unexplainable to them, that there's no genetic history, there's no familial history, and we're talking about autoimmune disorders and some cancers and cases that are generational type things that made no sense. And so when we go to this list of contaminants, and I'm going to keep going until Renee gets back on, this is what we were able to pull out of the file. This is the list that we provided to our toxicologist. And really, when you think about the chemicals that are being used here, we got to think about the purpose of what was going on and what was being made at this factory. And this is a place where weapons of war, missiles, they were doing electroplating for missiles and military systems. And because of that, they were using some of the most harmful chemicals that are known to man, but they were necessary, right? The lawsuit here, I think it's important to know, it's not the fact that they used these chemicals. I think that in using these chemicals, there's a necessity in accomplishing their job. It's really the disposal of them. And so the TCE and the PCE and the trichloroethane, the vinyl chloride and the methylene chloride are toxins. And I think on the next slide, I mean, you can see right here some of the other heavy metals, the arsenic, the lead, the chromium. But if we go to the next slide, these are certain chemicals that have known side effects, that have known cancer-causing properties. And the TCE, as you can see here, has been associated with kidney cancer, liver cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and leukemia, the blood cancers as they're generally referred to, testicular cancer and lung tumors. And when these TCEs are breathed in, that the inhalation or ingestion or dermal or touch can lead to these type of reactions. One of the things that we look at really and that jumped out at first is the effect on the nervous system and the multiple sclerosis clients that we talked to in the beginning. And if you see the TCE and the PCE and the vinyl chloride, they all have nervous system effects. Talking with our expert and going through this list of about 30 or 40 chemicals, we were able to match it up. The way that we did it was we provided him a list of chemicals and he provided us a list of expected diseases. And those two things seem to overlap right on top of each other in a way that to us personally, at first seeing it, was pretty shocking. Mercedes, do we have Renee back on? Not yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, just mute your computer, and if you have your phone, you should be okay.
Got it. How's
Sorry, better? Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Sorry, this is a new world we live in, so pardon my technical difficulties here, everybody. I'll carry on. Let me know if there's any more problems. But as Mike was saying, we pulled out 4 of the contaminants here. Pulled these out is they're present all over the facility. They're some of the worst problems that are present at that facility and have been. And as Mike was saying, related to a lot of the problems that we're seeing, especially the autoimmune diseases, the central nervous system effects, and rare cancers. But again, got to understand that these are just 4 of this list. So there are a wide array of different harmful consequences that can happen as a result of these exposures. And these particular contaminants were used mainly as industrial solvents to degrease machinery, weaponry, things in the production of the things that they were producing at this facility. But the problem was they didn't properly take care of them and properly dispose of them. What they did instead was, in many cases, just dig ditches and dump toxic sludge into them. And we're talking thousands of tons of toxic sludge across acres and acres across many years. There are other harmful things they did too, but for a company that can be so careful when it comes to manufacturing missiles and bombs, literally rocket science, the regulatory files indicate that they weren't being careful at all when it came to disposing of these known toxic waste. So this is just a few of the problems that can be associated with exposure to the contaminants that are present there. And we'll take some more questions. I'm sure you have some about these and other exposure consequences at the end here.
Hey,
but I'm gonna move on. Yeah.
This might be a good time for Michael Ram to talk a little bit about those chemicals and how they affect the class action and the medical monitoring.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here with us. My name is Michael Ram, and I've been a consumer class action lawyer for 38 years. I'm not going to tell you my whole 38-year history. I'll just say one trial I had was against the Veterans Administration for veterans who were exposed to radiation in atomic testing and who suffered from numerous cancers and other related illnesses. And it's my privilege here to work on your behalf along with Mike and Renee on the class action that we have filed against Lockheed that goes along with the personal injury case that Renee and Mike have been talking about. And in the class action, we have the same claims on behalf of everybody in the Tangelo Park community. Even if you don't have any symptoms yet, you're part of the class unless you choose not to be. And as Mike was saying, there are 2 main goals of the class action, in addition, of course, to damages, but the 2 main goals are medical monitoring and an injunction. And because these chemicals that we allege Lockheed has exposed the community to can cause these serious illnesses, not just cancer, but as Mike and Renee were saying, damage to the nervous system and the cardiovascular system. We're asking for Lockheed to pay for medical monitoring, and there are procedures available now that doctors can implement so that if there is going to be a medical effect on anybody in the community, you can catch it early, which I think everybody knows is incredibly important when it comes to treating these sorts of cancers and other diseases. So that's the medical monitoring that we're going to ask Lockheed to pay for on behalf of everybody in the community who's affected by the pollution from these dangerous chemicals. And then secondly, we're going to ask for an injunction because as Renee's been describing and as Mike's been describing, we allege that Lockheed is still not responsibly handling these dangerous chemicals, and there are still important steps that we're going to ask the court to order Lockheed to take to safeguard your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Go ahead, Renee.
So the next
So
couple,
the next couple,
All right, I'm not sure what happened to Renee. So these are the exposure pathways, and I think we talked about it a little bit, but just to remember that it's not just breathing the air. I mean, the thing that about these chemicals, they are stripped and they become gaseous, is that they do not have an overwhelming smell. So there's not a time that you're going to know necessarily, unless there's high concentrations all at once, that you are being exposed to certain carcinogens. You know, if you were to get, you know, a high concentration and smell TCE, you could smell a sweet smell, but in general, you wouldn't. So when that chemical goes out, when it's spread out from the air stack, which we believe is at a lower level, about 20 feet off the ground from the documents that we've seen, and the wind takes it, it's going to land somewhere. And when it lands somewhere, if you're playing in your yard, it gets in your drink, it's in your water, and you drink it. You can also ingest it or dermally touch it, which is you know, dermally just means touch. It can go through the skin. It can cause the same effects just by, you know, playing in your yard. All right, so this is going over the same thing. This is the volatile chemicals. You know, volatile in our sense, what we're talking about is the fact that these are not. Justin Ray says Mercedes needs to hit mute on hers. Maybe that's good. Mercedes, can you try hitting mute on yours and see if that helps us out? We mute. There is somebody there in Mercedes that they can mute her line because we're getting feedback.
Yeah, let me try. Hold on.
sorry guys.
All right. So the volatile chemicals that we talked about means that it can turn to gas. We can go to the next slide. I think we've covered this.
okay.
You sounded good there.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I don't know what's been going on. I'm sorry, guys. So anyway, that's a good overview. If you could piece it together through our technical difficulties of what these lawsuits are about, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. As Mike said, you know, we're going to be careful. If questions get too specific, we don't want to inadvertently talk about confidential or privileged information in a forum like this, but feel free to email me. There's my number and my email, rrocha@forthepeople.com. I'll get back to you right away, and we can discuss some of your more case-specific details. But that being said, I'm going to end the presentation, and we're going to take a look at the chats and the Q&A and address some of the questions that have been asked.
All right, Renee, one of the first questions that I see here is, are there particular date ranges where contamination peaked that should be of most concern, or really, you know, just date ranges that would be important to the people of Tangelo Park? I think would be a good overview as far as statute of limitations, you know, and possibilities of any date that would affect their ability to seek redress if they feel that they were injured here.
Sure. You know, as we said, this contamination has been going on for many, many decades. The cleanup efforts, which again, ironically, we think put the community at further harm, began in the late 1980s and have continued since then. So basically, any time frame within the past multiple decades is potentially harmful. We don't know enough to say that any given years are more harmful than others. It's been going on for a long time, and it's been a dangerous condition as far as we can figure. So as far as that goes, I would encourage you to contact us if you want to ask about your particular dates, but it's been a problem for a while. As far as statute of limitations goes, there are exceptions to that. In Florida, as in many jurisdictions, we have a discovery rule which provides some allowance for people to bring claims even if they're past a statute of limitations in a situation where you had no reason to know that you had been wronged by somebody, and that only later came to your understanding. So I would encourage you to contact us and ask about it, but I don't think many people would be barred from bringing suit just because they're finding out about this now.
And just as a quick recap for those that may not speak our language, statute of limitations is the set duration of time that a person has to bring a lawsuit for any action. It is defined by the legislature in this case of what it is. And generally in Florida, it's 4 years for a personal injury such as, contracting cancer or multiple sclerosis, and generally death or passing away from that disease is a 2-year statute. But as Renee said, we'd encourage you to reach out and speak to your attorney or any attorney if you have questions about your ability to bring a lawsuit on behalf of yourself or your loved ones, as we can't give you specific information about that, and everybody's case will be a little bit different. Michael Ram, there's a lot of questions on here that I think are really fair questions, and it's people that live and work in the community. And the two big themes of the questions that I see are, one, how can people get tested now if they can? What can they do? What if they don't have the means to do so? And then finally, how concerned, this one may be to Renee and Michael, but how concerned should people be that are currently living in that neighborhood or currently working in that environment of the immediacy of something happening to them, within the next couple of months?
Well, I'll let Renee answer the question about how concerned people ought to be. The medical monitoring that we're going to ask the court to order is going to take some time. And I don't want to get into too much of a discussion in this forum about whether we would ask for a preliminary injunction, for example, or ask for an injunction after a trial, but it's not going to be right away. So if there's some way that you can see your doctor and get tested and keep all your records, keep all your medical expenses so that we can try to recover them in the lawsuit, that might be best. And I understand that these are very difficult times, and that it may be a stretch, but I would, and I'm not a doctor, but I would caution you, if at all possible, to see your doctor and to keep the records. And then as soon as we can, we will ask the court to order Lockheed to pay for the medical monitoring, but it's not going to happen right away.
And let me just one thing with that, Renee, to Michael's question. There's questions about, and I know that we're proceeding both ways. People have asked if they want to be a member of the class, how do they become a member of the class, or what would they do, or do they have to do anything at this point?
You're a member of the class if you're in this community affected by this pollution, unless you choose to opt out. It's generally an opt-out procedure. And if we get an injunction, that's going to protect everybody, obviously, in the community, because we'd be asking for an injunction to stop the pollution on behalf of everybody. But for the medical monitoring, you're in the class unless you choose not to be.
And just kind of dovetailing on what Michael's saying, that right now we are in the process of requesting a class to be certified. We've started that ball rolling of saying that we have a group of people that are similarly affected, that we're asking for this relief for everybody. In the event that that doesn't happen, we will be representing individuals, and currently we represent about 50 people that have not experienced injury yet, and their loved ones have not experienced injury. But in an abundance of caution, in the event that something procedurally goes and they say this isn't a class, this is an individual case, we're also looking at those, and we have clients in that situation as well. So hopefully there's two ways to address those concerns. Renee, why don't you take the immediacy of what people should worry about or not, or do we even know at this point of how long-term exposure it would be required?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And just to comment on what you guys were just saying, for anybody who's interested in the class and whether their rights would be better protected through that or through individual case, just reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss it with you. In some cases, it may make more sense for you to have a standalone case, or if something starts to develop that makes that more of a legitimate option for you. So we'd be happy to talk to you about your individual circumstances. As far as what should we do if we live there right now or work there right now, I can understand your concern. I certainly would be concerned if I was in that position myself. I guess the answer is it's hard to say. We have learned a lot about the history of the contamination and what's been going on over the decades. But we don't have a precise picture of what's happening this day, September 30th, 2020. We know a lot about what's happened up to this date. But I can't tell you that it's absolutely dangerous right now. What we've seen gives us concern, but we need to know more, and I don't want to unnecessarily cause fear here, but I can tell you that through what our experts have told us, the circumstances that have occurred in the past have been unsafe, and we don't know that those have stopped. So look, I wouldn't encourage you to quit your job tomorrow or move, but you may want to consider what your options are. And, again, we'd be happy to discuss anybody's individual circumstances privately and go over this in more detail.
And let me add to that, Renee, that generally when we've shown you some chemicals and we've talked about the harmful effects, these are not immediate type results. You're not exposed to TCE for a day or for a month or for a week, and all of a sudden you will likely cut down this. I mean, I can't say it's impossible, but it would be highly unlikely. That would be a highly unlikely result. These are long-term exposures. These are living with chemicals constantly, and then the repeated act. If you think about post-cancer, the way they develop, think about, I'm not saying that this is the same, but think about, when you smoke cigarettes, you don't get cancer from smoking one cigarette or two cigarettes, but I can't tell you if it's going to be 1 year, if it's going to be 2 years right away. We are developing the science with each of these chemicals. And as you can see, when we're talking about the disparity between the diseases and how different they are because of how many chemicals there are, there's going to be different reactions for different people. People have different susceptibilities, different genetic makeups, and so not everybody is the same. We know that. One of the things that we have already started, which I think is important to know, is a census-style survey, which we are going to canvass the Tangelo Park neighborhood to talk with families about all potential links that they may have within their family where all of a sudden this light bulb goes off. I had multiple sclerosis. I had this autoimmune disease. I had this once in a 2 billion cancer, and my mother had it. I mean, people that I've gone to high school with and worked with throughout my life. They call me, and what was, really terrifying is they're talking about 5 different members in their household, 5 members that live together, and they all have these rare disparate cancers, right? Or MS. And in our firm, people are reaching out to us and telling us that we live there and we did it. So it's not an overnight thing. We need to further understand how long of exposure is needed, but that's why, the class action that we brought is separate from the mass action. And one is injuries now and one is injuries in the future. And those two things working together hopefully will help make this problem safer for everybody.
Mike, I saw some questions about what if we didn't live there? What if we only worked there? And Michael, the class action covers people who either live there or work there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Anybody who was affected by the pollution should be included in the class definition.
All right. Let's see. Try to see if there's any other questions that we can answer right now.
I see one here, Mike. Somebody asked, what happens to loved ones who have died? So it is possible to bring a wrongful death and survival action on their behalf within certain time frames. And those actions basically seek to recover for the legal rights that they would have had if they were alive to bring suit. And the wrongful death that may have occurred. Those can be brought generally by a surviving spouse or family members.
All right. And, there's a lot of questions about what do I do? And really, if you have legal counsel, you should reach out to them and talk to them about your legal options. And if you're concerned about your medical health, I would encourage you to reach out to your doctor. We are not doctors and we cannot give you that best, but they can tell you about different susceptibilities, different exposure levels, different risk, and what you should do for your health and for your family's health. All right, I think unless anybody sees anything else let me say this. This is important, and there are a bunch of questions on which diseases we're seeking in this, that we allege are a part. And as you saw from that brief set of chemicals that we put up just before, the range of potential illnesses and diseases is wide. We are representing people for birth defects. We're representing autoimmune disorders. We're representing different cancers and breathing problems. At this point, I would say we just don't know. And in an abundance of caution and to not leave anybody out, we are pursuing all takers at this point because of the broad range of chemicals and the diseases that line up with it. It's hard for us to say no at this point. A lot of it will come down to what's called causation and how much of a link is between the carcinogen that we allege and the disease that we allege. It's such an early stage, and without medical records from each individual client and actually going through their potential exposure and how it came to be, it would be too early for us to say or to give you a definitive list. As it progresses, I think, and with our census survey, we're going to see patterns, and that's what we expect to see is what is the pattern, what are the more likely diseases. So as that becomes clearer, we will continue to update the Tangelo Park lawsuit website. We will continue to have a forum where if people have questions and they want to reach out, represented by us or not, we can help.
We've got a question from one of the participants saying, right now the suit is against Lockheed Martin. What is the possibility that a third-party defendant could become involved? We haven't seen anything right now that would indicate that would be necessary. There has been a pretty solid ownership of Lockheed Martin and its predecessor entities. It used to be called Martin Marietta, but same company, just after a merger. They've operated this site the whole time, and according to the filings in the regulatory file that we've seen, we don't see any reason to suspect that others may be responsible for this contamination. So sitting where we sit right now, I think that's unlikely. You never know what could come to the surface, but I would doubt that any other defendants would become involved. I've seen some questions about specific kinds of disease, and those are probably, straying into the area that Mike raised in the beginning of the call. We don't want to get too specific in a public forum like this, but we'd absolutely be happy to talk to you about it. As he said, we've seen, unfortunately, several different kinds of birth defects, different kinds of cancers, a lot of autoimmune diseases. So unfortunately, the impacts can be quite broad. And, we have not done our health survey yet. We're working on getting that together, but it would be surprising that this number of relatively rare conditions would arise in such a small area without there being something to tie them together.
All right. I think at this point we are gonna wrap it up. If you do have specific questions, again, you have Renee's contact information. You're free to reach out to any of us or to your own attorneys. And if your attorneys have questions and want to reach out to us, or your doctors have specific questions that they need to talk to us about, please feel free to pass on the information. This is meant totally to be educational, what we've learned so far. And as we learn more and the picture becomes clear as far as causation, which is the important part on each individual case, we will keep you informed. And as Michael Ram continues down the class pathway, and if you need to do anything extra to participate, we will keep you updated to that as well. So thank you all for your attendance, and we really appreciate your willingness to help out here. Thank you.
Real quick, Renee, can you just spell out your email for everyone so they can write it down?
Sure. It's rrocha@forthepeople.com. 2 R's, OCHA@forthepeople.com.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.